Well, the RSL started with the community arts dimension of our Arts College status. So we had a subcommittee of the governors, and they were responsible for the community dimension of the radio station and the Arts College bit of the school. And they decided that as part of the community dimension, they'd like to run a restricted service licence, an RSL, for a limited period and apply to Ofcom for the licence. Chris Watt at the time was on the Arts College subcommittee, and he persuaded me, as the person who was responsible for the project, to go ahead and get as many of our kids interested to work in the summer holidays for 3 weeks on the project.
I was working in Frome Community College, and I was head of media, and I met the deputy head of the school, Somervale School, on a conference which I managed over there, promoting the idea of media in schools. And we struck it off straight away. I mean, amongst, I think there was probably about 60 delegates there, but Mark and I sort of, immediately locked onto each other. And then shortly after that, I heard that over here in Midsummer Norton there was a proposal that maybe it'd be a great idea to have a trial radio station in the summer. So I sort of volunteered myself really and pushed in to come and join and see what was happening, and it was all great fun.
So 10 years ago, Mark, Kenny and myself were trying to come up with a way of using the school, some of Somervale School's facilities, and at the same time providing a project that some of the young people around the town could do during the summer. And that's where we decided that a short-term radio station project throughout the summer would be a really good idea, provide some training and education and development for some of the kids in the town, and at the same time provide something quite entertaining for everybody to together, adults as well.
Well, Somervale School was a specialist media arts college back then, and the school had invested more in the television side of things, but my view was that only really involved quite a small number of young people in media activities, and that a radio station would involve a lot more young people and also involve the community more.
Somer Valley didn't exist as a radio station when I arrived. In fact, I was employed by the board of directors to set it up, but it was very much around as a concept. It had a vision. It was achieving some funding. It had resolved so many of those things that I now know as I travel up and down the country with various kind of national hats on, that are serious challenges to community radio stations as they start. Where do you get your funding from? Where do you get your equipment from? How do you build your volunteer base? And how do you build engagement with the community? These are all big challenges, and it's what I arrived here to do in 2008. But I have to say that the trial broadcast and the RSL was the perfect foundation, because it had achieved some of those things already, particularly community engagement.
I started volunteering here at the radio station because my teachers were a little bit worried about my confidence. I was quite quiet in class and they were a little bit worried about me, so they suggested that I come and volunteer at the local radio station. And I'd heard about Somer Valley before. I'd listened to when it was originally an RSL, and I've always been interested in radio, so I decided to just come down here one day. I met up with Dom, and Dom got me straight on the course.
For me personally, it meant that I could connect with the wider community. As a church minister, you have your own kind of community of churchgoers, then you have a local community that you serve in. And I really felt that doing the radio show would introduce me to the wider community, and it's done that. And that's why I continue to do it now.
I decided that I wanted to be a writer, and I was told I'd never get a job doing that, so I needed to do journalism. And the journalism course that I was looking at doing for university was radio, TV and print, so I figured it'd be an interesting lead-in if I did radio first.
I was working with Chris Watt at the time, and he was involved with the project, but he was also doing the news programme, and so I'd have a little chat with him every day about what he was covering on his news programme. And unfortunately, by the end of the week, he suggested I came in and did the sports news. So this seemed like a good idea at the time to start off with, and then I remember the very last day of the RSL, I think he decided that he wasn't really going to cover much news himself, and he just left the whole hour open to sports. And I've really sort of, I suppose I haven't gone back since.
As a media teacher, I was always very interested in helping young people particularly to decode the messages which come over in media. I think that's even more sort of relevant today than it was even 10 years ago, when I think that a vast amount of the media is distorted and full of sound bites and actually leading people into decisions they wouldn't otherwise take.
My initial thought was this would be difficult. It was quite daunting, I think, to think that in the third week, the people who hadn't had any radio experience at all until that moment were going to be charged with running a station, which was, in fact, sort of a badge of the school, broadcasting to anyone who cared to listen on FM in the whole of the Somer Valley. But I remember Chris, in a typically optimistic way, said, of course it'll work, and of course it'll be marvellous, and we should go ahead regardless. So that's what we decided to do.
Initial obstacles were probably experience for a lot of us. So we had a station manager and a trainer, Mike Walker. But other than that, no one had ever done radio before, apart from this little Creativity Day thing we did a few months before. So it was just understanding the methods of radio, and actually what we thought of radio wasn't actually what radio is at all. So it was all very different to what we all imagined it.
So one of the biggest issues we had was actually technically, we had a setup where as a presenter I'd be sat in the room talking in the mic, and then on the other side of the glass was Pete Helmore, and he was pushing all the buttons, doing all the things, and the talkback stopped working, so I couldn't hear him and he couldn't hear me, and he had to cue up a song and I had no idea what was coming. And so he was trying to explain to me via charades through the window exactly what song was meant to be playing next so that I could introduce it. So I'm garbling away trying to keep momentum going on the radio show, and he's doing charades through the window trying to explain Britney Spears' Hit Me Baby One More Time, and he's doing all the hand gestures. And it's just such a fond memory of, laughing and the silliness, but then the seriousness of all the technical issues, trying to set up sort of a productive and well-run radio station.
Not at the time, no, because we were kind of operating out of a school common room, essentially. It wasn't anything, we didn't have like proper studios or anything like that. And what we did have was just like microphones and then a desk that was in a room several meters away from us, so we didn't really think that it was going to be as big as it is now, and certainly not to the extent it is now with the amount of volunteers and everything that we have.
We definitely didn't think it would be as successful as it was today. Of course, we started off, just in the radio station. A few of us sat around with our coffees, plotting plans for the future. And now Somer Valley FM is listened to by, a large group of people, and it just turned out absolutely incredibly. And of course, we couldn't have done that all without Dom Chambers, station manager. So yeah, it's been very successful, and I'm quite surprised.
I certainly didn't think I'd still be here 10 years later. But I don't know, because you don't know. It's a very evolutionary thing. And I think that, to say sort of strategically, it was going to be a success, people were going to listen to it, volunteers would get involved with the station would have a full schedule of programming, and that actually once people had got their confidence with what they were doing, they would look to do more. How, realistically speaking, you're placing an awful lot of faith in what's turned out to be hundreds of people who have put in that effort. So I don't think anybody, you could hope that they would, but actually nobody could have known. And certainly if you had told me that I was doing the things today, if you'd have told me 10 years ago that I could be doing the things today, I would have thought you were completely balmy.
Oh, I've got a lot of very fond memories, but I guess one of my fondest is a recent one. I now have responsibilities for the education of children and young people in care in Bath, North East Somerset, and a few months ago they made 2 podcasts here about what it's like to be in care, to help other people to learn what it means to be in care, and they thoroughly enjoyed the project. produced 2 very professional podcasts which had a launch in Bath. That was a very special moment for me.
I don't know, I remember when we first started, I did what was the Alex Davis show with special guest Martin Blackmore on the station, and we first set up the texts, and it was really nice when it first all came together, when texts were flooding in and we used to have emails. The first time that people really started interacting with the station, it really felt alive.
My fondest memory is probably not one that most people would pick, but the sort of person I am, I love doing this sort of thing. If you remember about 3 years ago, in about 2012, 2013, we had that big storm. In the middle of the night, about 2 o'clock, me and Pete Helmore raced up to our transmission site, and we stood in the middle of a field, in the middle of nowhere in Clandown, climbing the tower and fixing things. And we probably shouldn't have been doing it at that time of the morning and with the amount of rain, but we fixed it. And I think that's probably one of my fondest memories. Is it's about anything can happen at any time, and I wouldn't do what I do now if I didn't love the job.
Have you guys interviewed Pete Helmore?
Yeah.
Yes, Pete Helmore was a tiny little, he was shorter than me at the time, and he was our producer, and we nicknamed him Producer Pete, and he got very protective of the desk area. And another kid who I think was probably in his year decided that they were going to lock themselves in that room and not let anyone in, and just watching Pete throw a tantrum out in the corridor outside was probably the funniest thing I've ever seen.
Well, it's one of the things I'm most proud of as a deputy head of Somervale School. When you get older, you always think about a legacy. And if my legacy is that as a director of the station and as the person who led the RSL licence, which led on to so much, has created a station for its community with 10,000 listeners and 100 volunteers, I'd say that is a pretty satisfactory legacy. Now, there are many other things in education that I'm proud of, but for this particular community of Norton Radstock, I would say undoubtedly I will leave thinking that's my biggest legacy to it.
So far, I think it has been creative. I think there's some good programming that goes on. I think the vision of exploring local issues that perhaps might not find their way into mainstream media has been significant and important. Giving voice to people and groups within the community who don't necessarily find it so easy to get their voice heard. Those are all things that a good community radio station should do.
The greatest achievement for me, I think, is just keeping it going, really. And the amount of volunteers, there's people who've been here from the start, there's constantly new shows coming on. I mean, I think to have so many volunteers come through and keep refreshing and recycling, probably by joining up with the community groups and joining up with the school, I think it's been a fantastic achievement. Not many, it's a very hard, I know from my job, it's very hard to get volunteers to come and do regular things. You've got to value them, so the station's done really well to keep people on board.
I think Somer Valley FM is successful because it really is a community. Not only does it seek to serve the local community, but it's really a community of volunteers. There are very few, as you know, paid staff, and they do a great job in the short time that they have available. But it's the long list of present and past volunteers that have really made this community here work. And I think it comes across in the programming as well.
From standing back and watching it, for the last 3 years of working, I've been involved in the station quite a lot, but I've done a lot more standing back and just watching it. I think what Somer Valley's really good at is getting really engaging people. Loads of places can get volunteers, but getting the volunteers to be really engaged in doing something what they love or learning a new skill is quite hard. I think Somer Valley's done really well at that, be it Dom, the manager, be it Luke, be it everyone around us. I think we've done that really well, to be honest, and I think having as much new on-air content than we do, which rivals even some of my stations, it rivals other commercial stations, and the amount of the quality as well. It's easy to do a lot of things, it's not easy to do a lot of things really good, and I think we do it really good. I think it's been our biggest success is just the quality, the content, and the people.
One thing that endures is the developmental experiences that young people get at the station. And it was always clear to me that for a kid who's just starting out, they make a video, they take it home and show their parents, and their parents compare it to what they see on the BBC or Channel 4. And it's never quite there, really, despite how talented the kid might be. And but with radio, with a relatively small amount of training and development and good mentoring and a bit of talent, actually kids can be producing radio that's at least 90-95% as good as the local commercial station. And it gets broadcast live, and then they take it home, and their mum listens to it, and their auntie, and they go, oh, hang on a minute, you're nearly as good or as good as the local commercial station. And that gives kids a massive boost to their confidence, and opens up their eyes to the possibilities that actually maybe I can do this thing, maybe I can work in radio, maybe I can be a journalist, maybe I can do whatever I like in this media world.
One thing I know about this place is that everybody's here for the right reason, because they're not here to pay the mortgage, they're not here to put the cornflakes on the table, they're not here, as my father would say, to keep their body and soul together. Maybe they're here to keep their soul together, but they're here because they love radio. I do take, and I know many people are right to be proud that we took this project from a classroom in Somervale School to the Radio Academy Southwest Station of the Year within 5 years.
Given that we operate on a pretty small budget and almost entirely staffed with volunteers, the fact that we beat every single commercial and BBC station in the southwest of England to that award, and the following year we're nominated again and came close second. Achieving that as a station.
Myself and Dom aren't paid for all the hours we do. We love working in radio, and actually probably the more things that are more valuable to the station are actually probably done in volunteer time, so the outside broadcasts and stuff like that. And I think that keeps the morale up, and keeping morale in a radio station with over 100 volunteers is very hard, and it's been difficult over the last few years with different things, but we're in a really good place at the moment, and I'm proud of every single person here.
Summer Valley embodies aspiration, not just from the people that are involved in it, and I think that perhaps one of its great success stories is the cross-generational interest. So it's not just people who are at Norton Hill or Somervale or Ridlington, it's not even the primary schools, it's not just people in their 20s or their 30s like me, or even some of the older supporters that we have who come onto the sports show who are retired, The fact that people can do that, and the fact that people want to do that to a standard that you would actually hear on professional radio, is the greatest testament that you could have for Summer Valley.